Madame Hoffman.
Hi, Premier.
How are you doing?
Well, thanks.
Hello.
Hello, so good to see you again.
Nice to see you.
Hello, so good to see you again. Good to see you.
This was dated the last one.
Beautiful.
I would like just to inform you that I'm really
What are we going to do without you?
Oh my god. I hope the new content will be even better than me.
Where
But
do you go to now?
back home, because working for the ministry, and then, I don't know, maybe another time. It's not confirmed for sure,
Good afternoon and welcome. Please remain standing whilst the Canadian and Ukrainian anthems are sung by the St. Martin and St. Matthew Elementary School Choir. Well, good afternoon. A heartfelt thank you to both choirs. It's so wonderful to have so many talented young voices, and I think there's something that's so special about hearing the voices of the future of our province here in the seat of our democracy to lead us in the singing of our national anthems. Let's give them a round of applause. My name is Nathan Cooper, and I have the pleasure and honor of serving as the Speaker of the Legislative Assembly of Alberta. And I'd like to acknowledge some special guests who are joining us today for our ceremony: the Honorable Premier Danielle Smith, the Honorable Sarah Hoffman, MLA for Edmonton Glenora, on behalf of the Leader of the Official Opposition, Consul General Danilenko, the Consul General of Ukraine in Edmonton, Ms. Arisa Boychuk, the President of the Ukrainian Congress Alberta Provincial Council, Ms. Therese Schlepfriga, the Vice President of the Canadian Polish Congress Society of Alberta, and Mr. Nathan Koronik, the son of the late Holodomor survivor, Mr. Leonid Koronik, and he is accompanied by his mother, Anna, and their sister, Joyce, who are seated here in the front row. I also see a number of members of the Legislative Assembly of Alberta, former members, ministers of the Government of Alberta. We also have a special guest joining us today, is Miss Christine Swazdeski, the spouse of the former Speaker of the Legislative Assembly, Mr. Gene Swazdeski, his daughter Ariana, and I also understand there may be a couple of grandkids back there, yeah, thank you for waving, of the late Speaker Swazdeski, who of course is a good friend of the Assembly and a great friend of the Ukrainian community. Ladies and gentlemen, honored guests, members of the Ukrainian community, and those who are joining us online, thank you for being here today. The Holodomor was a brutal act against Ukraine, enforced and enacted by Joseph Stalin and the Soviet government less than 100 years ago. The loss of so many people was and is devastating. The impact on Ukrainian families, ancestors, and the bloodlines of so many was unmeasurable. To those of you here who have experienced loss due to this tragedy, we mourn with you. It was not just a loss of people. The Holodomor is a lasting symbol of the devastating effect of political oppression and unrestricted power. It is an attack, and it was an attack, on Ukrainian cultural values. It devastated a national identity and left a nation in grief. What it did not do is crush the spirit of the Ukrainian people. The very first Ukrainian immigrants landed in Canada on September 7th, 1897. And today there are over 1.2 million people of Ukrainian heritage in Canada and over 340,000 here in the great province of Alberta. One of those people was Leonid Koronik, who was the last known Holodomor survivor in Alberta. Leo, as many knew him, was born into the Holodomor and survived against all odds. He made a life for himself and for his family here in Canada and was captivated by poetry. Leo was an honored guest at the Legislative Assembly annually for our Holodomor commemorations, and we were deeply saddened to learn of his passing last March. I was fortunate to have known him and was incredibly touched when he gifted me a copy of his poetry entitled, "I Lived There, Hungered, but Survived." In his memory, I would like to recite a small portion of his poem, Hell Like Holodomor. It reads, "At times it seemed there was no God, for Stalin's rule and gave the nod. To evil men you act my way, the cave sees no light of day. And yet since World War II went by, some countries still apologize. Though in Ukraine 10 million die, in Russia every eye is dry. I lived through that and came to tell that you would know how they behaved. They threatened, tortured, and enslaved. They thought we would not rise, but we had faith, just a small grain. His poem depicted his own painful experiences having lived through the Holodomor, and it concluded, "Let us all stand for motherland, with courage and steady hand, at this divisive timely hour, may heaven grant us a greater power. This somber moment let us pause, remember those who for a cause have paid the highest price, their lives. God saw their grief, tears filled their eyes." His powerful words will remain with us and remind us that we must remember the horrors of the past and honor those who have gone, their families who continue to live without them, and a nation that still faces persecution. And no matter our race or nationality, we stand together here in the home of our democracy to protect the rights and the freedoms of all people everywhere. Slava Ukraini. I would now like to invite the Honorable Danielle Smith, the Premier of Alberta, to bring remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to be here today with members of the UCP caucus, Mohammed Yassin, Jackie Armstrong Hominick, Andrew Boychenko, who's of Ukrainian heritage himself, Jennifer Johnson, Jackie Lovely, Rajan Sani, Glenn Van Dyken. Also, hello to Ms. Hoffman, the Deputy Leader of the NDP. Also, Mr. Alexander Doilenko, Ms. Arisio Boychuk, Ms. Therese Slamfriga, and Mr. Nathan Koronak. Pleasure to be with all of you here today on a somber occasion. Today we gather to remember one of the most terrible acts of genocide in human history. We honor those who were lost. We name out loud and on public record the atrocities that occurred and those who committed them. We break the silence they held so tightly to. 91 years ago, the Communist Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, led by Joseph Stalin, deliberately and systematically sought to destroy the Ukrainian nation and its people by mass starvation. Their intent was the total eradication of Ukraine's culture, spirit, and those who fought to preserve it. They wanted to win, once and for all, their war against those who fought to retain their property, way of life, and individual freedoms. In doing so, they knew they needed to destroy not only freedom and independence in Ukraine, but the memory of freedom and independence, to leave behind no one who remembered that Ukraine was once a free nation and could fight to be free once more. Joseph Stalin's campaign of mass starvation succeeded in killing millions of people, in destroying families, homes, and towns, in forcing good and innocent people into unspeakable conditions. But they failed in destroying the knowledge that Ukraine is a free nation, that Ukrainians have inalienable rights to life, to property, and to live in peace. We are all born with that knowledge in our hearts. Realizing this, the communist regime spent decades hiding the atrocities of the Holodomor. They denied what happened and prevented those who knew from speaking about it. In doing so, they may have thought that they succeeded in wiping away all memory of their crimes, but they failed again. After the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, records were unearthed. People found their voices once more. The memory of mass hunger and starvation remains, even to this day, in the minds of the Ukrainian people. And so this ceremony does not just mark what happened all those years ago. It is a testament to the fact that Ukraine is a free and independent state. We will never forget that, and we will help it to remain so in the face of continued attacks. We will not forget the Holodomor. We will not forget that all people were born free and have the right to remain free. We know this in our hearts, and we will continue to fight for it.
I would now like to invite the Honorable Sarah Hoffman, MLA for Edmonton Glenora, to bring remarks on behalf of the Leader of His Majesty's Loyal Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and to the children from St. Martin's and St. Matthew's for starting us off in a good way today with music. We see a lot of children this week because, of course, there are many here today to make sure that we can pause and reflect on the opportunity that children have, but also the loss that was experienced in the Holodomor. And I know that many of you on this stage will also be at City Hall, among many other children who will also be there to gather. So I want to thank them for taking the time today. I also want to recognize that Consul General Danilenko is in his final week, I believe, of service to the province of Alberta, and I want to thank him and his wife and their family for everything they've offered here over the last 6 years. I also want to recognize that there are some NDP MLAs here as well, my colleagues Sharif Haji and Lauren Dack and Janet Eremenko, who are of Ukrainian descent, and the leader of Alberta's NDP, Nahed Nenshi. Thank you all for joining us as well. And I am here to bring remarks on behalf of Alberta's NDP official opposition. And I will say that as one of the many Ukrainian descendants in this province, it means something extra to have this opportunity to be here with so many of you who share in my ancestry. My mom's grandparents, so my great-grandparents, both sets of my moms immigrated from Ukraine when they were teenagers. To the children, it was the teenagers who were sent to come and come first and find out if there was a land of opportunity. And they worked to build the infrastructure that we are in all across our capital city, including the high-level bridge just behind you. Many Ukrainians who came helped to build that. And then they were homesteaders. Most of the Ukrainian ancestors that we have who've been here for at least 3 generations. And this time of year, I think about them coming to this land and looking at how frozen it was and finding a way to fight and to survive. And if it weren't for treaty and if it weren't for Indigenous folks helping them figure out those first few winters, I don't think I would be here today. And I know that we also earlier this week marked 1,000 days since Vladimir Putin launched an attack again on Ukraine and Ukrainian people. And I know that over 600 children have lost their lives in that conflict, over 12,000 Ukrainians. It is wrong, it is unjust. Just as the Holodomor was wrong and unjust and people had an opportunity, should have had an opportunity for sovereignty and for self-determination, we stand with the people of Ukraine in fighting for that once again, and we demand justice and peace for every single person who is simply trying to survive. I also want to take a moment to recognize Mr. Kronik because he was at every Holodomor event that I've been at since before I was an MLA. He was always there, he was always a voice, and his legacy of survivorship and being a beautiful artist lives on, and I'm grateful that we were here to hear some of his words here today. So for everyone who was a victim of this horrific crime, Vichne Pomnia, Vichne Pomnia, Vichne Pomnia. They are forever remembered and forever mourned. Thank you.
We'd now like to invite the St. Matthew school dancers to join us up front. While they come, the choir will also prepare itself. They will perform while St. Matthew School Choir sings "To Give Us Hope."
Oh
I would now like to invite Consul General of Ukraine in Edmonton, Consul General Danilenko, to bring his remarks.
Honorable Speaker, Honorable Premier, Ministers, MLAs, дорога українська громада, пані Орисі Бойчук, thank you for coming, thank you for being with us at this sad ceremony in these sad days when we commemorating the millions of innocent victims of Holodomor in Ukraine. These days are incredibly sad days for us, for all Ukrainians around the globe. These days, with a deep sorrow in our hearts, we commemorate millions of innocent victims of Holodomor, one of the most terrible crimes in the history of humankind, deliberately planned and executed in Ukraine by the Soviet regime of Joseph Stalin. Millions of Ukrainians, innocent men, women, children, died from artificial starvation just in 1 year. Hundreds of flourishing Ukrainian villages were turned into a dead land. Ukrainians were doomed to the slow, agonizing death just because they wanted to be Ukrainians, to be free on their own land. They wanted to speak their native language, remember their own history, and honor their own heroes. But the Soviet regime wanted that everyone on the territory of the Soviet Union to be an impersonal Soviet citizens, blindly loyal to the regime, citizens who has forgotten his own language and history and doesn't ask any question. But that was not the case with Ukrainians. When Soviets understood that Ukrainians would never give up, they decided to punish them to death. The decision led to the suffering, pain, grief, and death in Ukraine on a horrific scale. We probably will never know the real number of victims because the regime diligently concealed all the evidence of the crime and prevented the dissemination of the information about it. But sooner or later, the truth always comes out. And that truth about Holodomor horrified the world. 32 countries recognize this Holodomor as a genocide against Ukrainian people. And of course, Canada and Alberta are among them. In 2008, Canada and the province of Alberta recognized the Holodomor as an act of genocide and proclaimed the official Holodomor Memorial Day. Thank you. On behalf of Ukrainian people, I would like to extend our words of gratitude to the provincial government and Legislative Assembly of Alberta, as well as to the Canadian federal government and parliament for these recognitions. It's very important for us Ukrainians. We highly appreciate your understanding and continuous support. I also would like to say words of gratitude to the Ukrainian community. You have made tremendous work to make Canadian society aware of Holodomor, to make these recognitions happen. After 92 years of that terrible crime against humanity, today Putin is trying to do the same, eliminate Ukraine as a country, Ukrainians as a nation. Russians want us to be silent slaves to them without own language, history, culture. Who doesn't agree must be eliminated. This is another act of genocide committed by the Russian totalitarian regime against Ukraine and against the free Ukrainian nation. Every day, they deliberately shelling our peaceful cities and villages, killing innocent women, children, destroying our civil and energy infrastructure, condemning Ukrainians to a cold winter without electricity and heat, hoping that we will not survive and surrender. But we will never give up. We will fight until our victory. And for this victory, we badly need your support and help. All democratic nations must stand with Ukraine today and fight together for our common future, for the values we share, so that such terrible crimes against humanity never happen again. Let us not forget the innocent victims of Holodomor 1932-33 and the innocent victims of the genocidal war that Putin unleashed against Ukraine in the 21st century. Вічна пам'ять.
Thank you, Mr. Danilenko. And let me also just take a brief moment to thank you for your service, not just to your community, but to the province of Alberta. Literally, the lives of thousands of Ukrainians are better as a result of the work that you and your team did during the most difficult of circumstances, whether it was a global pandemic or the Russian invasion, and the thousands of Ukrainians who resettled to Alberta during your tenure. Their lives are better as a result of it. And the province of Alberta is better as a result of your service. So thank you very much for everything that you've done. I would like to invite Arisha Boychuk, the president of the Ukrainian Canadian Congress Alberta Provincial Chapter, to bring remarks.
Thank you. Dear families and children of Holodomor survivors, Premier Honorable Danielle Smith, Honorable Nathan Cooper, Speaker of the Legislative Assembly, ministers, members of the Legislative Assembly, Mr. Alexander Danilenko, Consul General of Ukraine, ladies and gentlemen, dear children. On behalf of the Ukrainian Canadian Congress, Alberta Provincial Council, and the Ukrainian community in Alberta, I am deeply honored to stand here to commemorate those who perished in Holodomor, one of the darkest chapters of Ukraine's history. We are also here to express a profound gratitude to the government of Alberta for the Ukrainian Famine and Genocide Holodomor Memorial Day Act. We are extremely indebted, eternally indebted, to the late Jean Zwizdetsky, Speaker of the House, for being the leader and the champion of this act. And today, we continue to mark that day. This act ensures that we not only honor victims, but we also educate the future generations about this tragedy. The Holodomor, Stalin's deliberate campaign to destroy Ukrainian nationalism, claimed millions of lives through starvation, a calculated genocide. As Raphael Lemkin, the father of United Nations Convention on Genocide, said in 1953, the Holodomor was not a mass murder, but a destruction of a nation's soul. He warned that eliminating Ukraine's culture, beliefs, and common ideas would be equivalent to erasing its entire existence of Ukraine's soul. But yet, despite this unimaginable atrocity, Ukraine's soul endured. At its peak, Ukrainians were dying at a staggering rate of 25,000 per day, 1,000 per hour, 17 per minute. These numbers are not just statistics, but reminders of immense human suffering and resilience. Alberta is home to 400,000 individuals of Ukrainian heritage. It has become the beacon of remembrance and education by eradicating the Holodomor monument in Edmonton at City Hall, recognized in President Zelensky's speech. We've sent the message to the world: we will not forget. This year, we commemorate the Holodomor. We also pause to reflect the deeply somber milestone. On Tuesday this week, we marked 1,000 days since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine beginning. 1,000 days of renewed aggression, destruction, unimaginable loss. The tragic echoes of history are unmistakable. Once again, Ukrainians are fighting to preserve their freedom, culture, and existence in the face of tyranny. This anniversary is a stark reminder that history of ethnic cleansing is indeed repeating itself. It underscores the urgency of our collective commitment to remembrance, resistance, and resilience. Today, our commemoration carries an additional weight of sorrow as we remember Alberta's last known Holodomor survivor, Pan Leonid Korovnik, who passed away this year. His courage in sharing his story was a beacon of truth in the darkness of denial. Though he's no longer with us, his legacy lives on through his family, particularly his son Nathan, who honors his father's memory by being present with us today and sharing his father's poetry. In doing so, Nathan ensures that history remains alive and future generations understand the resilience of human spirit against unimaginable atrocities. The descendants of Holodomor survivors carry an extraordinary legacy. Your family's strength in surviving and rebuilding ensures the world never forgets the atrocities. We owe you an eternal debt of gratitude for preserving these stories and keeping these voices alive across generations. A special thank you to our children who've come here to sing so beautifully and to perform, to learn and to contribute to remembering this atrocity. Your voices not only honor those who perished, but also inspire hope that the lessons of history will be carried forward. Your participation ensures that the memory of Holodomor will endure in the hearts and minds of future generations. Сердечно дякуємо нашим діточкам, що ви тут разом з нами. Ми дякуємо вчителям і директорам за вашу присутність і підтримку, і що ви приймаєте участь кожного року тут разом з нами. As Ukraine faces ongoing fight for freedom and identity, the legacy of Holodomor urges us to stand firm against tyranny and protect human dignity. Alberta has taken leadership role in this effort, not only in memorials, but also by integrating the Holodomor into educational curriculum, ensuring that children learn about the tragedy. This is vital to building a world that rejects genocide and values human rights. We thank the government of Alberta for their support on this. Thank you. Today, we reaffirm Ukraine remembers and the world acknowledges. Let us honor the memory of those lost and commit ourselves to a future where history lessons guide us to peace and to justice. Вічна пам'ять, eternal memory. Slava Ukraini.
Therese Schlemfriga will now bring remarks on behalf of the Canadian Polish Congress of Alberta Society.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Madam Premier, ministers, members of the Legislative Assembly, our Ukrainian brothers and sisters, all our guests, but more importantly, all our friends, especially in these days. I am pleased and honored to represent the Canadian Polish Congress Alberta Society here with you in the Legislature building, the People's House. Today we remember a most somber and tragic event for the people of Ukraine, as well as for all Ukrainian communities across Canada and around the world. The famine genocide of 1932 and 1933, known as Holodomor. This crime was the orchestrated, deliberately planned starvation of millions of innocent Ukrainians who perished at the hands of the Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin, who was determined to exterminate the Ukrainian people, and along with them, their language, culture, will, and identity. Well, we know how that turned out. Holodomor, although ruthless and inhuman, did not totally annihilate the Ukrainian people. Those who survived exhibited extraordinary resilience, astounding courage, remarkable perseverance, as well as incredible physical and emotional strength. It is these redeeming qualities that have seen the Ukrainian people through Holodomor, the Second World War, as well as post-war Soviet oppression. Ukraine regained its freedom in 1991, only to confront challenges in the 21st century, the most recent and largest being Russia's brutal invasion of Ukraine on February 24th, 2022. It is difficult to think that almost 3 years have passed since that invasion. The Ukrainian people display unbelievable strength, stellar courage, resilience, and heroism as they today fight for freedom, human rights, and democracy for themselves and for us all. On behalf of the Canadian Polish Congress Alberta Society, I tell you that we stand proudly in solidarity with you, our Ukrainian neighbors and friends, commemorating Holodomor and acknowledging the horrific atrocities taking place in Ukraine today at the hands of Russian aggressors led by another dictator, Putin. Holodomor remembrance is an extremely important act that honors and remembers the Ukrainians who have perished and those who have survived and will endure for generations to come. We are honored to call you our Slavic brothers and sisters. For the victims of Holodomor, may their souls rest in eternal peace. May their memory live in God's kingdom from generation to generation. And may Ukraine be triumphant in her fight for freedom, truth, and glory. For the victims, defenders, and fighters in the current invasion of and war on Ukraine, Slava Ukraini. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honor to invite Mr. Nathan Koronik to the podium to share with us a poem that was written by his father entitled Remember Famine Genocide.
It's an honor to be here with you today and to read one of my father's poems. It comes from a book entitled I Lived There, Hungered, But Survived. It's a collection of poems in English and Ukrainian, as well as a brief biography. I know my father loved his homeland so much, but he's also loved his province of Alberta, a place where he found peace and prosperity, and became a poet later in life. And I'll share that poem with you today, Remember Famine Genocide. At times I sit alone and meditate about the world, the human race. Chaotic history, uncertain fate, and shadows hide my downcast face. For in Ukraine there was a restless sky, yet independence she proclaimed. There was a joyful smile in every eye. Long live our country, all exclaimed. And my country's future was not bright. On the horizon, stormy clouds. A sign there may not be real peace in sight. Instead, uncertainty and doubt. For Russia always was our neighbor foe, engaging in a cunning ploy, thus causing wretchedness and much great woe. she thinks her gift is to destroy. So 1930 was the start to liquidate the Kulak class, and Stalin acted with a stony heart, did more evil, never less. Sent 250,000 of our people east, and thousands died while going there. Still others, while in exile, were deceased. If some survived, lived in despair. And then in 1931, horrific deeds were taking place. A fearful sight, great famine had begun, but Stalin tried to save his face. 150,000 starved to death, but that was nothing to what would come. What you will hear may take away your breath or even make your body numb. For Kremlin agents and the troops have gone to peasants' homes with clubs and arms to plunder them with zest like Genghis Khan, then drank and danced in burning barns. Thus myriads of such Kremlins rank and file like pythons coiled around our chest to choke our life and all our land defile and poison into hearts in jest. Our world was tumbling like an old brick wall, thus causing ruin and despair. Exhausted people could not walk, but crawl. It was a yawning, open hell. So passed 3 years of hungry nights and days, of Kremlins shedding blameless blood. The whole Ukraine was in shock and dazed. Disease and death came like a flood. 10 million people Stalin starved to death, our fathers, mothers, children, youth. He took away God-given life and breath. He hated God and us and truth. His mission was to see our country die, but we resolved to save our land. He tried to kill us, jail, and crucify. We kept our saber in our hand. We called the world, please come, we starve, help us. They heard us well, and yet passed by. Then said, why do these people fret and fuss? We shrugged, but did not blink an eye. Though many decades came and now have gone, the memory still lingers on. And now we honor those who loved Ukraine till death, for they believed in her undying breath. Dear God, all those who died of famine genocide, grant them eternal rest. May they in peace abide.
Thank you, Nathan. In memory of the victims of Holodomor, we will now light the candles. I would like to invite the Premier, Ms. Boychuk, and Mr. Kronak to light the candles. Whilst the candles are being lit, we will be accompanied by the playing of Eternal Memory, performed by children from St. Martin Ukrainian Children's String Society. Please rise for a moment of silence. Slava Ukraini, glory to the heroes. Please be seated. Well, honorable members, guests, children, and those who have joined us, a special thank you to some dear friends of Alberta who are initially from Alberta's sister city in Ukraine and helped on many trade missions to Ukraine and were forced to flee as a result of the Russian invasion. Nazari Yuknii, Victoria Redko, and their children Arsen and Lucan provided me with my Vyshyvanka, which I'm so proud and honored to be able to wear today, and I wanted to say a special thank you to them. But importantly, thank you for being here today, for honoring those who suffered the worst atrocity possible, the Holodomor. Our country and our province have been infused with Ukrainian culture. The music, dance, food, agricultural skills, and the spirit of resilience of a people who strive for peace, justice, and freedom. And so before we close, I want to leave you with a thought today, that we must never lose hope. Hope that we can do and hope that we can be better. Hope that good will continue to prevail over evil. But hope is nothing without our actions. Our actions toward one another, our actions towards the oppressors, and our actions towards our neighbors will help prove that we can move together, that we can move forward in that hope and harmony. May God bless you, may God bless Ukraine, and may God bless Alberta. Thank you for joining us today. This concludes our ceremony. Immediately following the ceremony, members of our platform party, along with our choirs, will just have a couple of photos on the grand staircase. Immediately following that photo, I would like to invite members of the Assembly who would like to join the photo immediately following to do so. Thank you so much for being here. Please travel home safely.